He left his wife in a dangerous jungle where deadly animals lived. She was sitting there when a cowboy appeared with a lion, and the jungle turned into a home. In a land where danger breathes through the trees, a woman waits, abandoned but not broken. Her husband vanished into silence, leaving questions tangled like vines. When a lone cowboy appears beside a lion, boundaries blur between threat and salvation. What begins in betrayal twists towards something wild, and maybe something true. There's a kind of warmth only found in a chipped mug of strong tea by a fire that's earned its crackle. Out in Fairbrook, Wyoming, winter comes honest and folks come early to the gossip. 3 months earlier, September the 2nd, 1887, the sun still kissed the dust roads gold, and Miss Cora Whitlock, daughter of Judge Whitlock himself, had just slipped out the back of Sunday service in her riding boots. They'd told her love was a matter of bloodlines and banknotes. But that morning, she met him, boots muddy, eyes wrong for polite company, and the rules she'd been born into started to bend. Wind cuts different when you got no one waiting on you, comes down off the mountain like it remembers every wrong you ever done, and it don't forgive easy. Not here, not in this place where snow don't melt proper and time don't pass clean. They say the West is wide, open, boundless, full of chance, but I reckon that's a lie. Ain't nothing wide about a land that presses down on you quiet-like, presses till you forget what it felt like to breathe free. Out here, it ain't the wolves or the weather you gotta mind. It's the silence. That's where the real danger lives. Right between the wind and the wood, in the space where your name used to echo. I built a fire once, for warmth. Now I build it for noise, just to hear something answer back. There's a woman somewhere I once called mine, a boy too, small hands, wild laugh. But that was before the jungle, before the bad decisions and the worse men, before fate sent me up into this cold and told me to sit with what I'd done. Sometimes the family you choose is the one fate blows in with the storm, and sometimes that storm don't knock. It just comes, hard and fast, and you either open the door or you freeze alone. You learn to stop asking what's coming. The wind'll tell you when it gets there. The wind had a way of finding the cracks. It whistled low beneath the eaves, pulled through the boards like breath through teeth. The man sat still in his chair, boots near the hearth, watching the flames twitch like they were nervous to be there. Outside, the snow piled against the log walls, white as bone, silent as a prayer too long unanswered. He didn't speak, hadn't in days. Each morning came grey and hard, same as the last. He'd rise before the light, hands wrapped in worn leather, coat stiff with cold, trap lines checked slow and steady. Nothing moved quick in this weather, not even hunger. He'd haul in what little me still wandered through the trees, thin rabbits, now and then a fox, skinned by habit, salted without thought. Inside, the cabin was orderly but not clean. Dust clung to the high shelves, a thin crust of it over books no one read anymore. A tin cup sat near the bed, untouched. 2 wooden chairs, one never moved. A rifle rested by the door, not for show. A small coat, child's size, hung on a nail beside the doorframe. The man never looked at it directly, just near it, around it, like you might with the edge of a grave. A row of letters sat above the hearth, bound in twine. The topmost one had a crease torn through the name, like someone had tried to forget it mid-fold. He hadn't opened any of them, couldn't, wouldn't. They sat there, collecting smoke and time. At the far end of the room, beside a cracked windowpane, stood a rough pine table, half set. 1 plate, 1 cup. The other side stayed bare. He didn't need the second chair, but he hadn't moved it either. That was the thing about exile. It wasn't just where you went. It was what you brought with you, what you refused to let go of. Some nights he lit the lamp just to watch the shadows move. Gave him something to track. Something that didn't look back. He didn't pray. Not anymore. But once in a while, when the wind rose high and mean, he'd murmur a name into the dark, not loud, not soft, just enough for the cold to carry it. And if the mountain answered, it did so in silence. The storm didn't ease in. It hit like a hammer through glass. By late afternoon, the light was already gone. Wind roared down off the ridgeline, pulling snow sideways, fast and hard, like it was chasing something mean. The man had barely got the door barred before the cold slammed against it, rattling the hinges like bones in a tin can. Inside, the fire spat and huddled in its stone throat. He threw another log on, slow, methodical. No use wasting movement. He'd seen storms like this before. Up high, winter didn't play fair. It came sudden and without mercy, a thing alive and without conscience. He checked the latch again. The cabin creaked like it might lift clean off its moorings. Then, something strange. Movement. Out past the tree line, half lost in the white. A shape. He blinked hard, stepped to the window, squinted through the warped pane. Could have been his eyes playing tricks, could have been the dark doing what it does, stirring up ghosts. But then it moved again, staggering, uneven, human. He opened the door an inch, snow rushing in like it had been waiting. Cold slapped him hard. The shape stumbled closer. A woman. She was bent forward, head wrapped in a rag, coat soaked through. Her boots, what was left of them, dragged more than stepped. Behind her, two small bundles staggered too, half carried, half dragged through the drifts. Kids. He didn't move. Not right away. He just stood there, staring through the gap in the door like it was a judgment being passed. They didn't belong up here, not in this, not now. She raised her head once, just enough for their eyes to meet. Hers were wide, raw, desperate, the kind that don't ask for help, not because they're proud, but because they've already stopped expecting it. The girl fell first. The boy tripped, trying to help her. The woman dropped to her knees, arms flung around them both like she could hold the wind back by will alone. Still, he didn't move. Then the boy cried out. A sharp, scared sound that didn't belong in this kind of cold. That was what did it. He cursed under his breath, threw the door open wide and strode into the white. The snow fought him with every step. He lifted the girl first, light as a scarecrow, skin like stone, then the boy, shivering hard, face pale as ash. Last, the woman. She tried to stand, but her knees gave. He didn't speak, just threw her arm over his shoulder and hauled them all inside. Once the door slammed shut, the storm kept on howling, angry to be denied. The fire flickered wild, heat bee, Ollie holding. He laid the girl near the hearth, wrapped her in a horse blanket, the boy next. The woman collapsed by the wall, eyes fluttering, lips cracked. He poured a shot of whiskey, held it to her mouth. She drank with a shudder, coughed, wiped her lips, then curled toward the fire like a wounded thing. Still no words. He peeled off the boy's coat, boots, toes white, but moving. The girl mumbled something. Maybe a name. Maybe not. He didn't ask. No one said anything for a long while. The storm raged on. Inside, only breath and firelight moved. The cabin held the heat, but not the peace. The storm outside still screamed, flinging snow against the logs like it aimed to pull the place apart. Inside, the fire popped and hissed, logs sweating out their cold. Shadows danced long on the walls, taller than the people making them. He moved quiet. The kind of quiet that don't come from caution, but habit. The kind a man earns after too much time alone. The woman hadn't stirred much. Sat near the fire now, blanket tight around her shoulders, lips cracked but no longer blue. Her hands trembled when she reached for the tin cup he'd set near her. She didn't thank him. He didn't expect her to. The girl, no more than 8, was tucked against the far wall, eyes half-lidded, watching. She hadn't said a word since he brought them in. She just looked, long and hard, like she was trying to memorize everything before it disappeared. Her hair was a tangled mess, cheeks raw from the cold, but she sat straight, like someone had told her once that pride didn't cost nothing. The boy, younger, maybe 5, was asleep beneath a patchwork quilt, thumb in his mouth. He twitched now and then, like he was dreaming of things he didn't want to remember. The man crouched near the hearth, poked at the coals with a blackened stick. Sparks danced up, catching in his beard. He didn't notice. Dee didn't care. The silence pressed thick between them. Not awkward, something heavier. After a time she spoke. "Eliza," she said, voice hoarse. "That's my name." He nodded once. Said nothing. She glanced toward the girl, Clara, then to the boy, "Tommy." Still he didn't speak, just stirred the fire a little more as though names needed time to settle. She didn't ask his. That was smart. Instead, she turned toward the flames again, hands cradling the cup like it might break if she blinked too fast. "They weren't supposed to be out there," she said after a long spell. "We were headed south. Got caught in the pines 2 nights ago. Snow came quicker than I reckoned." He grunted, a sound halfway between understanding and regret. "I thought we could wait it out. I was wrong." He finally looked at her. Just a glance, nothing soft in it. "Lot of folks think they know the land," he muttered, "till the land tells 'em otherwise." She didn't flinch, just nodded slow. "We ain't running from weather." That hung in the air a while. He stood, crossed the room, took a kettle from the hook, poured the kids warm water from the stovetop, left the cups near their makeshift beds. The girl gave a small nod. The boy stirred, opened his eyes just enough to see the steam, then drifted off again. "Eliza," he repeated, trying the name in his mouth like it might bite. It didn't. She shifted, winced. One boot was off, sock frozen stiff. Her ankles swelled ugly beneath the wool. He knelt, tore an old shirt into strips, wrapped it slow, not gentle, but careful. She watched him close. "You live up here alone?" He didn't answer. She didn't press. The wind howled again, rattling the door. The girl jumped slightly. He noticed. Walked over, checked the latch again, tight. Then he picked up a thin quilt from the wall hook and brought it over to Clara. She blinked up at him, wide-eyed. He tucked it around her without a word. She whispered, "Thank you." He gave a small grunt, sat back near the fire, this time facing them. No one spoke for a long while. Just the fire breathing, slow. The woman's eyes began to drift shut. The boy's thumb slipped from his mouth. The girl leaned her head against the wall, blinking slow. The storm screamed on outside, wild and sharp. But inside, for the first time in a long time, the cold didn't win. The storm passed in the night, but it left something behind. Not just snow, though there was plenty of that. Drifts high as the windows, crusted with ice. But it was something else too, a stillness, the kind that settles when the land stops shouting and starts listening. In the cabin, the days fell into rhythm. Not peace, just rhythm. Mornings came cold and grey. He rose first, always, lit the fire, fed the stove, checked the traps before light. When he returned, the girl would already be sitting by the window, wrapped in that patchwork quilt, watching the trees, like she expected something to come out of them. The boy, Tommy, followed him like a pup, not talking much, just wide-eyed, always watching. He tried to help, handing tools, stacking kindling wrong. The man let him, didn't praise him, didn't scold him neither. The boy seemed to understand that was as close to kindness as he'd get. Eliza moved slow. Her ankle stayed swollen, but she bore it like someone used to hurting without complaint. She'd start the fire again if it burned low, sweep the corners, boil water. One morning she found flour in the back cupboard and baked biscuits so hard they could have doubled as ammunition. No one said a word. They just chewed and swallowed and passed the plate. He added a second log bench to the table, not because she asked, because she didn't. They ate together now. 3 on one side, him on the other. Never felt full, no matter how much stew they ate. The food fed their bellies. The silence fed something else. He caught himself watching the girl draw once. She used charcoal from the fire, scratched it across Brie. Own wrapping paper, a crooked house, smoke from the chimney, a figure with a big hat and a beard, another with long hair and a bandaged foot, 2 small ones beside them. He didn't ask to see it. She didn't offer. The boy called him Mr. Never Pa. Never sir. Just mister. It stuck. Eliza noticed the picture too. She didn't say nothing. But that night, after the kids were asleep, she stood near the hearth, arms crossed, staring into the flame. You had a family once. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer right away, just poked at the coals until they flared. Had a boy. Caleb. She nodded like she already knew. He's buried east of here, up near Dry Hollow. Wife too. He said it like he was reporting weather, something that had happened and couldn't be helped. I'm sorry. He didn't answer. She turned to him. You ever go out there? To visit? He shook his head. Ain't nothing left but names on stone. Silence again. She stepped closer to the fire, touched a hand to the mantle. What happened? He stood slowly, picked up his coat, pulled it on. Ain't a story worth telling. And with that, he opened the door, walked into the cold, and left her with the warmth. Later that night, when the fire was down to embers, she found the letters above the hearth, yellowed, unopened, bound tight with twine. She didn't touch them, just stood there, looking. The next morning, Clara left the drawing on the table, folded neat. His figure now had a small smile, just a faint line. Almost not there at all. He looked at it a long time before slipping it inside the drawer beside the rifle. Said nothing. But that night, for the first time since they'd come, he set out 4 bowls instead of 1. The storm left days ago, but its ghost stayed in the wood. Every creak of the cabin floor sounded like a warning, every gust of wind against the walls like something knocking from the other side of silence. She was packing. Not with panic, just the quiet method of someone who'd made up her mind. A bundle of the boys' clothes folded neat on the cot, Clara's boots chair, decked and wrapped in cloth, a pouch of dried beans and biscuits tied shut with string. He didn't ask when, didn't ask why. She caught his eye once, across the room, her hands full of folded things. Her mouth opened like she might say something, then closed again. The words weren't ready, or maybe they were, and she just knew they wouldn't change anything. Tommy ran outside that morning, not far, just down to the tree stump where he'd started making a little pile of rocks, called it his fort. Clara followed, keeping him in sight, pretending it was just a game. Eliza stayed inside, staring at the satchel like it held more than just supplies. That night, the fire burned low. The stew simmered, untouched. She finally said it. We'll leave at first light. He nodded slow, chewed a mouthful of stew that had no taste to it. Clara looked up at her mama, then at him. Her lip trembled, but she didn't speak. Tommy didn't notice at all. He was too busy chasing the cat that wandered in 2 days ago and decided to stay. Later, when they'd all bedded down and the fire was nothing but red breath in the dark, he stood near their door. Not moving, just standing, listening. He could hear her breathing, soft, steady. She wasn't asleep. Neither was he. He stared at the wall a long while, then spoke low, barely above a whisper. Place ain't much, but it's safe. Got root cellar full enough to last till spring. Land's good. Creek runs strong come thaw. I ain't asking for thanks, and I ain't begging neither. A pause. Then, just, maybe the silence was too quiet. She didn't answer. Not then. But he could feel her eyes on him in the dark. Not cold, not angry, just watching. Come morning, the satchel still sat by the door, untouched. Clara fed the cat. Tommy helped him stack kindling. Eliza cooked breakfast, biscuits, this time softer. No one said a word about leaving, not one. But when he set the table, he made sure to lay out 4 spoons again, and this time she sat down without hesitation. The town lay low in the valley, all dust and sharp glances. They rode in slow, him on his old roan, Eliza behind on a borrowed mare, the children perched on a sled hitched to the back, wrapped tight against the spring wind that still carried winter's teeth. Clara gripped the reins like she meant to never let go. Tommy held a stick like it was a rifle, pointing at crows and fences and waving at dogs that didn't wave back. He hadn't ridden into town in near a year, not since the last supply run, and even then he'd gone at dawn, left by dusk. Folks had whispered back then too. Now the whispers turned to stares. Boots scuffed boardwalks, chairs creaked on porches. A few men tipped hats slow, more out of caution than courtesy. A woman outside the mercantile tugged her child behind her apron as they passed. Eliza noticed, of course she did, but she sat tall, wore her bonnet tight and her chin tighter. He stopped in front of the general store, tied the reins to the post. "We won't be long," he muttered. Clara jumped down first, skirts catching the breeze. She glanced at the candy jar in the store window, didn't say a word, but her eyes lingered. Tommy's boots hit the ground with a soft thud. He marched toward the door, bold as anything. "Can I get a peppermint?" He ruffled the boy's hair. "We'll see." Inside, the air smelled of flour and old wood. Mr. Palmer, the storekeep, looked up from behind the counter, froze mid-count. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said. The man didn't smile. "Need oats, salt, flour, medicine, if you got any worth a damn." Palmer nodded, slow, eyes sliding past him to Eliza. She walked past them to the shelf with thread and soap, picked up a bar, sniffed it like she'd forgotten what clean things smelled like. The kids wandered, quiet as they could. Then came the voice, rough, familiar. "You got nerve bringing her here?" The man turned, slow. His brother stood in the doorway, hat low, face leaner than he remembered, eyes sharp as flint. "She's not yours," he said. "She ain't property," the man answered. The brother stepped forward, boots heavy. "Folks talk. They say you been holed up in the hills with a woman and 2 young'uns that don't look nothing like you. They eat, they sleep, they laugh," the man said, voice even. "Ain't that what family's supposed to do? That ain't how it's done." He stepped closer. "Then maybe how it's done ain't worth much." A silence filled the store. You could have heard a needle fall in a hayfield. The preacher came in next, Reverend Gable, long-faced and soft-spoken, but not today. "Some folks say you died, Jacob. Others say you shoulda." Jacob looked at him, then around the room, at the boy peeking from behind a sack of feed, at the girl clutching her little paper drawing like a shield, at Eliza standing straight, her back to the wall but her eyes firm. "I did die," Jacob said. "Just took a while to lay down." And then he turned back to the counter. "How much for the peppermint?" Palmer blinked. 3 cents. Jacob pulled a coin from his coat, laid it down flat. Tommy grinned so wide it nearly split his face. As they stepped out into the street, Jacob handed him the candy. The boy held it up like a prize from a war. "You didn't have to do that," Eliza said, quiet. He nodded. "Didn't have to do any of it." They walked back to the horses in silence. Clara looked back at the town once, just once, eyes thoughtful, like she was trying to decide if this place still held power. It didn't. They rode out slow, the sun dipping low. Dust trailed behind them. Behind them, the town whispered. But up ahead, the hills didn't ask questions. No fire tonight, just the slow churn of wind whispering through chinks in the walls and the low groan of Timby, easing in the cold. He sat near the hearth anyway, boots off, back crooked against the stones. The day had been long. Fence repairs, smokehouse patched. Tommy lost a glove in the woods and Clara cried when she thought she'd scared a rabbit bad enough to kill it. Now it was all quiet, children asleep. The cat curled near the stove, tail flicking now and then like it dreamed of something it couldn't catch. Eliza came in from the porch, shawl still wrapped around her shoulders, hair loose from the wind. She didn't speak, just poured the last of the coffee and sat across from him, knees close enough to touch if either dared. He didn't look at her straight, just watched the dark settle in around the windows. Finally, he said, "I got land." His voice was rough, dry as saddle leather. "Ain't rich, and it don't stretch far, but it holds up come snow. Water runs clear, and the soil's better'n it looks." She sipped the coffee, eyes fixed on the flame that wasn't burning. She didn't blink. "I built this place for someone," he went on. "She never saw it finished. Took sick. Back when the boy—" He didn't finish that part. Let it hang. "After, I didn't think there was reason to do much else." The wind knocked once at the shutter, then left them alone again. "I ain't asking for love. Wouldn't know what to do with it if it came." He shifted, not out of discomfort, just honesty. "But I got hands to work, food to share. I can offer shelter, a name if it helps." Eliza didn't flinch, didn't laugh or scoff or ask what kind of man makes a proposal in the dark with no ring, no promise. Instead, she set her cup down careful, looked at him, not through him this time, but into him. "You asking me?" she said, voice low. "Or are you offering something to survive by?" He looked at her then, really looked. "Maybe both," he said. She nodded once, not yes, not no. Just enough to let the silence settle. When she stood, she didn't say anything more, just moved past him, hand brushing the back of his shoulder in passing, light as breath, warm as a stove in winter. And in the still that followed, Jacob leaned his head back against the stone and let his eyes close. For the first time in a long time, sleep came easy. Spring gave way to summer without asking, then summer to fall, and fall to the kind of winter that bites early and don't let go easy. And still they stayed. No one ever said it outright. There was no wedding, no paper signed, no preacher's blessing beneath a steeple. But the cabin grew fuller, not just with people, but with a kind of quiet living. The kind that sticks. The kind that don't need to speak loud to be real. Clara took to riding like she'd done it in another life. Bareback at times, hair flying, skirts hiked in a way that would have made proper townsfolk stare holes through their teeth. Jacob never stopped her. He just watched from the fence line, arms crossed, saying nothing, but his jaw softened each time she turned that horse like wind through willows. Tommy, he was different, patient, quiet like water under snow, always near tools or books or both. He learned the fence knots faster than Jacob had, fixed the latch on the barn door with nothing but a nail and a stubborn little mind. Eliza ran the kitchen like a command post, except gentler. She cooked with little, made much, grew onions behind the outhouse, herbs in an old washtub. He never asked where she'd learned that, and she never told. They just worked. The days carried them forward like a slow-moving river, neither rushing nor still. In the evenings, Jacob and Eliza would sit by the fire. Sometimes she'd mend, sometimes he'd whittle. Sometimes nothing passed between them but the crack of a log and the hush of wind outside. That silence, it was earned now. Not the hollow kind that echoed through an empty cabin, but the sort that settled into the bones like warmth after cold. One day Clara brought home a pup. Mangy, thin, half-starved and full of bark. Jacob looked at it, sighed deep, then built it a bed from straw and an old saddle blanket. Tommy named it Amos. A photograph was taken that spring. A traveling tinker came through with a black box and silver powder, said he could freeze a moment in time. They stood by the porch, Eliza with her hand on Clara's shoulder, Jacob with a hand on Tommy's head, the boy grinning despite himself. When the flash went off, Jacob didn't smile, but his eyes looked different, like he wasn't bracing against a storm anymore. Later, Clara carved a name into a plank above the cabin door. McCrae. No one told her to. No one stopped her. And Jacob didn't flinch when he saw it, just ran his calloused fingers over the grooves. That night Eliza touched his arm while the kettle warmed, just once, a small thing. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. The years had taken much, but they'd given this, a life not built quick, not loud, but true. And that was enough. Snow began to fall again. Not hard, not yet, just those slow turning flakes that drift like ashes in the wind, quiet, aimless, soft on the land. The cabin stood where it always had, timber bones creaking gently in the cold. Smoke curled from the stovepipe in a thin, lazy line. Fences stretched out like old scars, worn and strong. The wood bore the work of many hands now. A horse nickered in the corral. Chickens clucked somewhere behind the barn. Footprints dotted the yard, small ones, fresh and playful. Jacob stood on the porch, coat buttoned, hat pulled low. His beard was more grey than not. His hands, though steady, bore the tremble of time. He held a cup of coffee gone cold, but didn't drink it. Inside, laughter. Clara's, richer now, woman-grown but still full of fire. Tommy's quieter chuckle followed, that warm kind that came slow and true. Eliza hummed low from the stove, some old hymn without words. He didn't turn to look. He stared out at the trees, where the forest dipped into shadow and the world narrowed into a thin, winding trail. The wind moved, through those trees, not a storm, not anymore, just wind. The same kind that had brought a woman and 2 children to his door years back, bleeding and half-frozen and carrying more ghosts than gear. He remembered that first night, the snow howling, the boy's cough, the girl's wide stare, Eliza's silence, the weight of it, the dread of needing people again. He'd thought he was doing them a kindness back then, thought he was the one rescuing. A creak behind him. Eliza stepped onto the porch, wrapped in her shawl, same as she'd been every winter since. She didn't speak, just slid her arm through his and leaned her head gently on his shoulder. And the voice came, soft in his head like a story whispered to no one. He thought he was rescuing them from the storm, but it turned out they'd rescued him. The snow thickened a little, began to paint the world white again, but this time it was just weather. And inside that cabin there was fire and laughter and names carved in wood that wouldn't fade.